all know me, I'm Kate. That is not the document that should be up there. And I'm going to be talking about what I did over fieldwork term a couple months back. So, originally I went to this school thinking I was going to go be a librarian, which is, of course, super cool. But I went to fieldwork term and I did it in this really small public library in a really small town called Rio Grande City on the US-Mexican border, right there. Okay, so it was a really lovely place. And my original goal when going there was very library-oriented. Find out how libraries are like cultural centers in their community and the kinds of things they do. But my goal was dropped for another as I got increasingly bored with my job and increasingly fascinated by the culture surrounding me. Experiencing it as an outsider, my goal became to learn more about regional identity and how it can impact your communication. So, I should probably tell you a little bit more about my job before my inner anthropologist starts freaking out. I was basically a library worker at that place. Really small library, not too much bigger than the first floor of Dewey. Yeah, you guys know about how that size is. My two jobs were dusting and inventory. Oh, 210 hours of dusting and inventory. I mean, there were a few other things like looking after the girls and boys club, making sure they washed their hands before touching the books after eating, helping people to find materials they wanted, sometimes even despite a language barrier. More on that in a minute. And also, I got to help out with the ESL class taught once a week. And that was kind of a cool experience for both of us, because, or for both me and for them, because I am a native English speaker with very little proficiency in Spanish. And they were basically native Spanish speakers with little to no proficiency in English. So, kind of like how Bennington does the cultural immersive program in their languages. I know a few of you take a language here at Bennington, you know how it is. It provided them with a similar experience. So, oh, do I have a, no, I don't have an image for this. Most people in that region, and this is the thing I thought was the coolest, use Spanish and English interchangeably within the same sentence. Sometimes even without realizing it. Like, my coworkers would start speaking in English, knowing that it was the only language I really understood, and then subtly shift over to Spanish, and then look over at me and expect me to answer, without really realizing that they did a language shift, so I was just like, okay, could you repeat the last half but in English? And nobody could tell me why. Why does this cultural phenomenon happen? Why do you sometimes use English and sometimes use Spanish? What works it? And they would just say, pues, I don't know. No sé. It was just something that happened. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Something else that I noticed was kind of the age range with the languages. Most of the Spanish-speaking only crowd was the older folks, who mostly came straight from Mexico. Their kids, the generation that'd be around like our parents' age, sometimes even our like older siblings' age, speaks interchangeably, and many of the older folks have like their kids or their grandkids who speak English fluently translate for them. I talked to many library patrons and a few people who came by selling stuff. Through their kids and grandkids. And that was kind of an interesting way to have like exchanges and have intellectual conversations, though we had to kind of trust the translator to do their job exactly right. And that's something you just don't really get too much. Let's see. I mean, something that I know I've talked about with you guys a lot is that some of the English words were different too. Like, back in Louisville, we call lollipops suckers. It's slang. Lollipops to 5-year-old. So my coworker once brought me this goat's milk sucker, which is kind of an interesting thing too. It was actually really good. But I turn around and say, oh hey, thanks for the sucker. And she just looks at me like I grew a third head. Not even a second head, a third head. And then she turns to her other coworker and grabs her and says, okay, tell her what you just told me. Thanks for the sucker? That's just not a word they use over there. They use lollipop. A few of you have also expressed to me that sucker is not really a thing that you guys say, that it's just lollipop. Or, like, when coming to Bennington and having kids from all over the country, there's like subs, hoagies, grinders. They all mean the same thing. But let's stick on the food topic and stay more away from the language topic. Okay, so, you know how we've got the candy aisle, like the baby bottle pops, the pixie sticks, all that kind of stuff. They've got basically all of those, but spicified. Chamoy and chili candy. It's ridiculous. There's like a whole aisle full of it, and all in different types. Like there's this kind, which is like the powder that you shake off, like the pixie stick. And there's this kind, which comes out in like a little paste. And this is something that's just entirely normal over there. Or over here in like the Hannafords, the Price Chopper, we have a Hispanic foods aisle. It's not even a whole aisle, it's more like a third of an aisle, where we have all the Goya brand stuff, the Hispanic food. And they have a Hispanic foods aisle too, surprisingly enough, but most of the Hispanic food is just spread out throughout the store because it's not something exotic or different. It's just what they eat. And I don't know why this came as such a big surprise to me, but it really did. And like, probably the best thing if you guys ever go down to the Rio Grande Valley, you have to go to a taco stand. The tacos are nothing like they are up here. They're real tacos. And you'll just have this little old lady cleaning up behind the counter, and there will be no menu. Nothing to tell you what you can order. You just walk in and you know what you want. It's a spiritual experience. More than that, eating them is heaven. But, okay, I got a little off topic. Let's go back to normalcy. Like, over here we have band and orchestra offered as high school music electives there. They have mariachi, which is totally badass. This is my coworker's son, by the way. She graciously let me use this picture. Or how they have taco stands everywhere. Back at home in Louisville, we have Taco Bells everywhere. That kind of stuff. Or to go a little more intellectual on you, in the Rio Grande Valley, they've got a very macho, gender roles oriented kind of culture. Like there is no such thing as somebody identifying as off the gender binary. You're either a man or you're a woman. You're born with this, you got this. Along with that, you've also got the traditional gender-defined roles, like the men are expected to be very tough, and the women expected to be very sneaky. And this is something that I know that we don't get too much of in Louisville, where there are all kinds of people define gender role expectations and gender identity expectations as well, and in Bennington here too. So seeing that was just kind of a shock as to, because the place is still in America, it kind of defied what I expected as being American. But I recently read for a paper in class, Mary, you have this class, it's Power in Place, that many people from outside the US consider it to be like this totally homogenous place where everything is the same. It's really not. Like, regional identity is such a huge thing, and who you are and how you see the world can change very greatly depending on where you come from and what your definition of normal is. It was like a completely different world to me, but to them it was just what they knew. It was their normal. So just as most of them don't really stop to wonder about what their definition of normal is and how it might vary from those of others, many of us also don't stop to consider like what we do and how it might be different depending on where we live, or for that matter, who we are. A lot of us, myself especially included, have experienced a certain type of culture shock, a small one, when interacting with someone of a different gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, race, that kind of thing. Just when you come into contact with someone and you realize that the way you see the world might not necessarily be the way they see the world, and due to these small differences, or sometimes large differences. So I might not have come to a conclusion to my new question about regional identity and how it affects communication. That's become a huge part of my plan though, which you'll all learn about more next year. But I'd kind of like you to walk away from this just questioning, what is normalcy and when do we become an other? That's all I have for you today. Are there any questions? No? Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you.